Middlemen and Endless False Narratives official by Anna von Reitz. Information provided to H.E. Cardinal Mamberti and the Vatican Chancery Court, in regard to our claims, March 6, 2005, January 19, 2023, in Seek. Obviously, the creation of such a situation, wherein the national governments of entire countries have been usurped upon and those countries have been occupied by their own territorial military forces, is anti-intuitive at best. The situation only makes sense when you realize that these are soldiers hired under contract by the national governments, but they have been operating as commercial mercenaries under the direction of British Crown Corporation Subcontractors, instead. That is, certain actions undertaken by bankers and lawyers, all undeclared agents for the British Crown, have created an unintended middleman position for the British Crown Corporation Subcontractors, a position that they, and their principals, have secretly abused. We have yesterday described how the usurping British territorial personnel left in charge by Abraham Lincoln substituted their own state-of-state organizations for our American service providers, and how they also then illegally and unlawfully seized upon property belonging to our states and created state trusts to cashier our assets and keep them under their control, to be used and abused for their undisclosed commercial benefit. We also described how they locked down our accounts in the banking system under the pretense of safeguarding our assets, for us, which resulted in the so-called off-ledger accounts. They additionally transferred our gold assets offshore to the Philippines and elsewhere under the same pretense of safekeeping our assets for us. Then they cooked up an excuse, under the Emergency Banking Act of 1934, to borrow our silver at a rate of $1 silver per IOU. Disguised as a Federal Reserve note. Thus, the colluding British Crown Corporation subcontractors and their municipal corporation counterparts housed in the District of Columbia, conspired to lock down and control our land, our gold, our silver, and other assets, including our credit, using the false pretense that they had a legitimate custodial interest in telling the world that they represented us in these matters, with no contract in evidence. Who can account for this astonishing lack of circumspection and gross disrespect of the law on the part of international banks? Will everyone claim that they couldn't read or didn't have a copy of the relevant constitutions? How is it that the diplomatic corps of other national governments accepted these con artists, who came to them with a sob story about a national emergency that the perpetrators caused, and no contract authorizing them to do any of this for us at all? How is this to be justified by any rational business standard? Where is the reasonable effort by the other principals to contact and notify us that all these self-interested presumptions and assumptions were being made behind our backs? We have also seen how these same lawless commercial interests colluded in the capital crime of unlawfully converting the political status of millions upon millions of Americans to promote more war profiteering and racketeering schemes against their employers, such as the new variation of the Bottomry bond scandal, substituting American babies for the ships and our American estates as the cargo. Among the other criminal results of these actions by the British Crown Corporation subcontractors and their municipal corporation partners, is the fact that our states could not pay debts, including service contracts. This is because our assets were locked down in trusts by these unauthorized pretenders and the banks were told to block our accounts by British Crown Corporation officers and municipal corporation officers, who appeared to be acting as our trustees or custodians, while acting as executors de son tort, instead. When an employer is encumbered for any reason, such that they cannot pay their bills, the workers are meant to simply stop working and go home until the employer frees up resources. In this case, of course, the employees were the problem. They had created the situation by locking down the employer's accounts and rolling our assets into state trusts, a problem that they intended to take full advantage of. The British Crown Corporation personnel and the municipal corporation personnel all mysteriously volunteered to stay on and to accept our credit as payment instead of the gold and silver required by their contract. The hypocrites did this, not as the rest of the world supposed, out of any concern for their employers, but because it was the only way they could both control our physical assets and access our credit. As we noted before, there is no consensual agreement or contractual obligation or granted authority in existence allowing the British Crown Corporation subcontractors or the municipal corporation subcontractors, either one, to access to the credit of our states. By pretending to have a custodial interest and pretending to represent us, and also thanks to collusion by the banks that all knew better, the employees got control of the employer's credit cards and began to spend. We were left unnotified and unaware of all these cozy arrangements purportedly made by our employees, on our behalf, and so, we could not object to them until now. We wish for all contractually unauthorized charges to be reversed and subject to review. We wish for the state trusts to be dissolved in our favor and returned to our direct control. We wish for all our blocked accounts and the blocked accounts we are heir to be released in our favor and under our direct control. We wish for our credit to be restored, made immediately accessible to us, and under our exclusive control. The banks stand notified and under demand, and so do the offending British Crown corporations and municipal corporations housed in the District of Columbia and other federal enclaves worldwide. Notice the fact that Serco, a British Crown subcontractor, has been operating as the paymaster for all the United States military forces. Does that make sense, for any country to leave its own military dependent on paymaster services from a foreign corporation? No, but it does make sense when you realize that the British Crown Corporation subcontractor housed in the District of Columbia has made the choice of paymaster absent our input, and is acting to benefit the interests of the British Crown Corporation, not the actual employers. The British Crown Corporation subcontractors have been secretly operating in self-interested breach of trust and service contract ever since they deceitfully ran Abraham Lincoln as a president, not the president owed to this country. The municipal corporation subcontractors have been colluding with them in this since 1937, when they jointly issued the Declaration of Interdependence of the Governments in the United States. The men and women thus employed in what appear to be our armed services are supposed to be operating as honorable soldiers of the national government that hired them, but even unknown to them, they have been acting as commercial mercenary forces instead, and they have been liberally and deceitfully misdirected by the British Crown Corporation. Subcontractors and municipal corporation subcontractors housed in the District of Columbia for many years, beginning as far back as the so-called American Civil War and continuing ever since. Please also note that the perpetrators, the foreign governmental services corporations, operating out of the District of Columbia, have also continuously enlisted our young people under conditions of fraud, deliberate deceit, and non-disclosure. These young people are deliberately misled to believe that they are serving their country, and that they are defending America, and that they are under obligation to register for selective service, and all of this is nothing but bunk promoted by self-interested foreign commercial corporations acting in breach of trust and service contract. These innocent young men and women and many career officers as well spend their lives under these delusions and consider themselves to be honorable soldiers, having no clue that their operations resulted in mercenary conflicts having nothing to do with honor, national security, if you assume that it is our nation that is being served, or anything but British Crown greed and intrigue. The motivation for keeping all of this secret is apparent. If the enlistees knew that they were signing up as mercenaries, they would demand a lot more money and benefits. If they knew they were engaging in something illegal and immoral, war profiteering, far fewer could be seduced into joining any such service. If they knew that they were in fact not obligated to selective service, far fewer would sign up. If everyone in the armed services knew that they were contracting with the British Crown Corporation subcontractor instead of the American government, and also realized that they were in receipt of invalid contracts, there'd be hell to pay. And if the American people, our state citizens, caught wind of it, there'd be hell to pay, as well as very, very substantial damage claims. So, now, this is precisely what has happened. Our contracts with the British Crown corporations and municipal corporations housed in the District of Columbia refer only to defense of our county, our land and soil. There are also some treaty obligations that apply to situations occurring on the actual high seas and navigable inland waterways, in which the British monarch is obligated to act as our trustee and defender. In both these instances, defense of our country, and under trust obligation on the sea, these hired defenders could be operating as honorable soldiers and sailors, but in the vast majority of their operations, they have been misdirected as commercial mercenaries by British Crown and municipal corporation middlemen. The so-called U.S. Armed Forces have not been acting as the honorable national soldiery we intended and agreed to support for purposes of defense of our nation-states and people. They have not been operating in compliance with their contracts with us, which are, in this case, also the constructive basis for the existence of these corporations. In their attempts to redefine and reinterpret things to suit themselves and to suit the ambitions of the British Crown corporations and municipal corporations misdirecting their activities, the personnel involved in this gross malfeasance have played many word games to evade and change their contractual obligations and have spun a great many false narratives to provoke response and support from our general public. For example, without any authorization from us, they changed the name of the Department of War to the Department of Defense, apparently because they cannot declare or participate in an actual war, and also to expedite their expansion of the meaning of defense, to cover their constant invasions of this or that other country under false pretenses. According to them, our country is under constant threat from tiny and relatively undeveloped places like Yemen and Mali, and in their imaginations from Iran, which hasn't engaged in a war outside its own borders for over 200 years, or from Iraq simply because they wanted to control Iraq's oil and plunder its cultural treasures. No doubt there are plenty of people worldwide who hate the Americans, because they mistakenly believe that we are doing all this war profiteering and condoning it, when in fact, our general public doesn't know anything about it. For example, when did our invasion of Mali hit the airwaves? Or, alternatively, the people here have been lied to by these British Crown Corporation and Municipal Corporation Subcontractors outright, as with the invasion of Iraq. The only weapon of mass destruction ever found was George W. Bush's lying mouth. Then, we find out after the fact, that the purported 9/11 attack was an inside job to benefit Larry Silverman, who was facing billions of dollars in losses on the World Trade Center buildings, which all needed asbestos remediation, and to excuse the Bushes from paying the Brady bonds and other debts of the municipal corporation subcontractor that were due, and to provide cover for an attack on the persons and records of Navy fiscal auditors who were closing in on all this fraud, malfeasance, and breach of trust. The only valid service contracts these faithless service providers ever had here, both the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the United States of America, were violated in spirit, in intent, and in fact. We find out that DoD, Inc. subcontractors hired Hollywood film crews to set up the night before the staged 9/11 event, to capture and embellish all the dramatic film opportunities, and have them ready to broadcast as high-resolution footage gathered from every imaginable angle to the colluding news networks that they also own and control. What we should have been seeing broadcast on September 11, 2001 were jostled and grainy unprofessional short videos and photos shot by tourists using handheld cameras and iPhones. What we got instead was Hollywood's finest high-resolution imaging, and from every angle possible. That in itself should have told everyone with a brain on this planet, even the members of the Blue Ribbon Cover-Up Commission, that the whole so-called September 11 disaster was a pre-planned false flag, brought to us by the municipal corporation subcontractors dodging their debts, and the British Crown Corporation subcontractors looking for an opportunity to justify an invasion of Iraq. We are here to say that the constitutional contract entered into by our state citizens is a land jurisdiction contract, and its intent is explicit. The words mean what the words say, and except for the Supreme Court, there is no authority established to interpret these words for the federal subcontractors. They have no authority, not their own authority, nor the court's authority in this case, to redefine the meaning of their contract with us. The word defense in 1789 and now means action to oppose invasion of our land and soil or to repel assault upon our ships and sailors on the high seas and navigable inland waterways. Defense of our nation does not allow preemptive attacks on nations that have not in fact injured us, and it most certainly does not allow mercenary operations and war profiteering, in our names, by British Crown Corporation subcontractors and Municipal Corporation subcontractors housed in the District of Columbia or anywhere else. We have provided one good and recent example of the false flag events these charlatans have been using as an excuse to proliferate and profit from war, but there are many others. We have proof that Franklin Delano Roosevelt was warned about the Pearl Harbor attack at least 3 days before it happened, and he did nothing. We have very good circumstantial evidence that the sinking of the Lusitania was done using explosives, not torpedoes. These false flag events and the false narratives that accompany them result in unlawful premeditated harm not only to those who are directly harmed by these activities, the innocent bystanders and their rescuers, but also those innocent set up as scapegoats who are slandered and blamed and often killed in revenge for acts they didn't commit, and finally, those who are lied to and who then take action on a deliberately promoted basis of lies fed to them by news sources that are all compromised as a result of being licensed and regulated. and which are often owned and operated by these same British Crown Corporation Subcontractors and Municipal Corporation Subcontractors, all operating without disclosure, under color of law, and conditions of deceit. We wish for these corporations together with their franchises, subsidiaries, and agencies, together with their assets both material and immaterial, to be forfeited to us and be returned to lawful operation under the control of our government. Contractually, we assert our rights as the last man standing. For the information and notice of the court, there has been an effort by some of the former employees of these renegade British Crown and Municipal Corporation Subcontractors to advance claims to the effect that they represent the Confederation which was founded under the Articles of Confederation in 1781, and that the Confederation is the lawful national government. This is simply not true. The individual nation-states of the Union established by adherence to the unanimous Declaration of Independence are the independent and sovereign entities referenced by all the peace treaties and contracts. For purposes of mutual action within the national jurisdiction of the soil, these sovereign entities act as the United States, which is the correct nomenclature since 1851. For purposes of mutual action within the international jurisdiction, these same sovereign entities have operated as the United States of America, an unincorporated holding company organized as a federation of member states since 1776. Both the United States and the United States of America are direct instrumentalities serving the now 50 enrolled nation-states that make up this country. In our American government practices and definitions, we are conforming to the same basic practices and definitions that other nations use, that is, states are international instrumentalities of the national governments. State of states are business organizations acting under contract to do routine business for the states. States give rise to states of states, not the other way around. Federations of states then give rise to confederations of states, not the other way around. There is a logic to what things are and the powers they have and the way they are constructed. Our Federation of States came into being in the fall of 1776 and the Confederation of States of States was not created until 1781. That is, after the states had created state-of-state business organizations for themselves and therefore all had representation as members of such a confederation. It should be apparent to everyone that states have an entirely different nature and different empowerments than the business organizations that serve them under state-of-state constitutions. Our Federation of States is similarly of a different nature and has a separate and greater empowerment than the Confederation of States ordained under the Articles of Confederation. Our Federation of States still exists and our member states operated by the nation-states of the Union are still competent to come into session and conduct business, whereas the Confederation has been inoperable since 1861 and is still awaiting reconstruction. It is our federation that was ordained by the sovereign nation-states to represent the interests of the member states and people in international jurisdictions, and it is our Federation of States that supports and maintains the lawful government of this country. Our state citizens operating the member states of our federation, are the people of this country, and they are the principles that ordained the adoption of the constitutional contracts that have been evaded and breached and dishonored by the British Crown Corporation Subcontractors and the Municipal Corporation Subcontractors housed in the District of Columbia. It is the lawlessness and criminality of these aforementioned incorporated subcontractors that has resulted in a rebirth of the kingdom of lies, and it is their bad faith that has resulted in territorial armed forces illegally and unlawfully occupying entire countries in breach of trust and in violation of their contracts with the national governments. This entire problem, worldwide, and the breach of faith, worldwide, has been caused by these British Crown Corporation and Municipal Corporation Subcontractors operating under a cloak of secrecy to the detriment of the national governments. We wish for these offenders against God and man to be forfeited, with all their assets surrendered to the control of the lawful national governments, and for non-essential components of these criminal enterprises to be liquidated. We wish for the banks to do their duty, and render service to unblock our assets and our off-ledger accounts and to expedite our access to our resources. We wish for the banks to block our erstwhile employees from having any further unauthorized access to our credit, directly by unauthorized appropriations, or indirectly, via the use of the constructed federal persons that have been created in our names for purposes of fraud and impersonation of Americans. We have set up our own bank system to return prepaid credit to the victims who have corrected their political status as living people under their own national government, and publish the same as part of our global recording system or by other reasonable means. This is a global system set up by the American government to return purloined assets and credit owed to the living people and their national governments. We wish for the persons responsible for this criminality to stand down, and cease and desist all unlawful and immoral activities such as injection of foreign mRNA into meat animals and people, arson and destruction of our food production and oil refinery facilities, destructive geoengineering applications, or any other self-interested deployment of any other bioweapons, nuclear weapons, scalar weapons, plasma weapons or any other advanced technology. These activities, all understood within the context of mercenary conflict, are criminal, unlawful, illegal, and immoral as well. The fact that people have had to face these attacks from those entrusted and paid to protect them, is just one more reason why these British Crown Corporation Subcontractors and Municipal Corporation Subcontractors need to be permanently shut down, together with all their franchises and subsidiaries and agencies. The antidote for this criminality cannot be a simple matter of correct education concerning facts, nor can correction be achieved by hiring new management, changing account numbers, or adopting new names. The true correction is a change in understanding that leads to a change of the heart. Any and all essential organizational structures need to be placed under lawful national government management devoted to the peace and well-being of our planet and our fellow man, not commercial mercenary corporations secretively exercising the powers of government, willing to kill billions of people and animals to make a buck. Issued by Anna Maria Riesinger, Fiduciary. In care of Box 520994, Big Lake, Alaska 99652. April 11, 2023.